Now we're going to talk about a documentary that I saw. I don't think you had a chance to see this.
No, I haven't.
It's a documentary called Sleeper Must Awaken, The Making of Dune. If you're like me, you already have your 4K.
I have that.
The 4K of Dune, also available in a steel box, which I'm upset that I found out that it was available in a steel box before. It was in a steel box. Why did I get this? But very happy. I think that I think that the Dune 4K turned out great. It was awesome. But
so is this on HBO Max or is it on the disc?
No, this documentary is available on Arrow Video.
Oh, okay.
So Arrow Video and the Arrow Video player. I'll let me see. I got a little graphic here that we can throw up. I couldn't find anything about it. It's actually not.
So this is not about specifically the movie, but about the.
No, this is about. Here, let me just explain it to you. It's about the 1984 Dune, directed by David Lynch. It's all about how he made the film from being approached, because he was originally going to direct Return of the Jedi, or as it was known then, Revenge of the Jedi. David Lynch ended up not directing that film and worked with Dino De Laurentiis. He did not have final cut on the 1984 Dune. It was originally intended to be a 3-hour epic. Obviously it's just a little over 2 hours, and the second half of the film just feels completely rushed, but it goes through everything that went into the production, from everything from the casting to the wardrobe, production design. It's a fascinating documentary. I think that it's interesting that the 1984 Dune kind of still has a life now that, Denis Villeneuve's Dune is out. Like, people are taking a second look at the original Dune as directed by David Lynch. I do happen to have a Japanese laser disc that has like this much longer cut, including scenes that people are just acting in front of green screens. They just sort of didn't finish the effects, but it's fascinating. It goes like things that I did not know about the making of the film. A lot of them were different casting choices. For example, originally Paul Atreides was going to be played by Val Kilmer. So there are a lot of alternate casting choices that it goes through. Stuff I never knew about the making of the original 1984 Dune and kind of the way it turned out. And it's interesting. I think Dino De Laurentiis has some regrets about, like, he didn't give David Lynch final cut on Dune, but he did give David Lynch final cut on Blue Velvet, which ended up being a much more successful film. So I strongly recommend. It's on Arrow Video. Is what I like about Arrow. They're kind of like Criterion for nerd stuff. So Arrow has a streaming service, and you can see this doc on the streaming service. And I assume that they'll also release it on DVD. I can't wait to watch this doc again. It goes through production designs I'd never seen before, how they did the still suits, which they really wanted them to look functional. They made hundreds of these still suits, how they did certain scenes, how Carlo Rambaldi, I don't know if you know Carlo Rambaldi, he did E.T. the Extraterrestrial. He designed E.T. for Steven Spielberg. Carlo Rambaldi designed the sandworms and kind of came up with that look. And what's interesting about it is when you watch this 1984 behind the scenes Dune documentary, which is the most comprehensive documentary ever about the making of the original Dune, you see that this influenced quite a bit Denis Villeneuve's Dune. There's a lot of, I feel like David Lynch made, even though the film was complex at the time that it came out, it's been around long enough that it allowed Denis Villeneuve to kind of like gloss over certain things because we knew it from the original David Lynch Dune. It also talks about, there's some great interviews in this documentary, including with Frank Herbert, with Steven Scarlatta, who did the documentary Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune. And a fascinating doc, which I highly recommend. It's about the unmade Dune movie from the early 70s that was to be directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky. There's also another great story that came from this doc. Orson Welles was originally who they wanted to get to play Baron Harkonnen in the Jodorowsky's version of Dune. Lynch's production, it was I think it was Raffaella De Laurentiis actually got everybody in the office, like, get together. Okay. They called up Orson Welles on the phone, put him on speaker, and asked, Orson, we'd like to ask if you would be interested in playing Baron Harkonnen in Dune directed by David Lynch. And Orson Welles responded, "You mean the floating fat man?" and he hung up the phone. So, I mean, it is what it is, but I'm really amazed at, like, I mean, I originally saw that when I was a kid, and I was a huge fan of the books, the original Dune books, and I'd read the first Dune book several times, and I remember being disappointed in the theater, mainly because I feel like they rushed the story.
Mhm.
It should not have been a 2-hour movie. It should have been minimally 2 movies, if not at least 1 3-hour movie. And a lot of the second half was glossed over. It's interesting though that they go through a lot of the visual, what Lynch was trying to do visually. If in the beginning of Dune you see the Emperor, he takes his cape off, and the movie ends with Paul Atreides having the Emperor's cape put on him. And there are all these sort of visual things that Lynch was trying to do to bookend the film and actually tell a coherent story. And then of course he added some things, and then he also talked about the how each of the worlds were created, from Dune to, Caladan to Gidi Prime, which he kind of took some artistic license with, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I look, I can't recommend this enough. I can't wait to watch it again, but it's on the Arrow video player, and I assume coming soon to DVD. Let's get to a couple of these chat questions. I think David got fed up with the politics on set of Dune and just concentrated on writing Blue Velvet instead. It was kind of like, yeah, that's the thing that he kind of went to like just almost as a form of therapy. I mean, they shot it in Mexico at this new studio and had like the run of the entire place. It was pretty fascinating. Frank the Bunny says, I wonder if Lynch would have used the Ewoks. Could have a world in which they didn't exist before Disney doesn't market its sequel trilogies on Porgs, Babu Frick, and Baby Cash Grab for cat ladies. Actually, there's a story behind that. If you go to filmthreat.com, I actually interviewed David Lynch and asked him about directing Return of the Jedi. Originally, and you can look this up, there were 2 warring factions on the moon of Endor. It was the Ewoks and another race called the Yuzums. I think it was called the Yuzums. One was very tall and one was very short. And David Lynch very pointedly asked George Lucas, okay, if you have one of these creatures is very short and one very tall, how am I supposed to have the eye lines work? Like, he's just thinking practical director. So he did not want to do Return of the Jedi, because what Lucas was looking for was a journeyman director who would just do what he said. And he ended up with Richard Marquand, a British director. So a couple quick comments before our special guest, Roger Nygaard, joins us. This is about the guy who bought Jodorowsky's visual companion book and thought they have the rights to Dune now. I'd love to see a real documentary about that situation, actually. That's funny. That's a whole separate issue. Somebody bought the original Jodorowsky visual companion book thinking they could actually publish it and make money on it. They don't own the rights to it. That would be a funny documentary about stupid people. It's what they call in investing dumb money. That's what they call that. Mark O'Brien says Lynch could put out a 3-hour final cut, but he's not interested in doing it. Yeah, there is a longer cut, but it's credited to Alan Smithy, and it has aired on television. You can find this stuff. There are longer versions. There's even and I'll put this in the chat. There is someone who did a 4K version of David Lynch's Dune and assembled as much as possible they could find of additional footage that's been out there from deleted scenes and the Japanese Laserdisc and whatnot. And someone put it together. You will see that link in the description here, so you can seek that out. And here we go. R says the religion of Muad'Dib is not Muad'Dib. Well, there you are. Yeah. And really? Okay, I'll search that video out. Yeah, Frank if not, it'll be in the link in the description when we cut this out. So I don't know. I loved it.
Let me ask you, because I saw the David Lynch version like a couple months ago for the first time, and I think my initial feeling was, well, I don't understand why Dune is such a great book, and I think there's a lot. Does the documentary really get into kind of what made it fail, what made Lynch's version fail? Or...
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. The second half of the movie was glossed over. It's all montage, and it just
the story was so muddled. I had the hardest time following the story.
If you read the books, you would know what's happening, but it was so glossed over. They blew it. They really blew it. But
and Denis did it so well. I understood everything from the opening of the latest Dune. That is like, okay, this is the movie I wish I had seen earlier.
Well, Denis Villeneuve has the advantage of taking his time, right? Mm-hmm. It's 2.5 hours for the first half of the book.
Yeah,
my assumption is, part 2 of Dune is at least going to be 2.5 hours, if not longer, to completely tell the story of the first book, which it's possible. But I've always thought that like Dune should have been it's Game of Thrones in outer space. Mm-hmm. That's what Dune. Well, actually, Game of Thrones is a ripoff of Dune. Great houses feuding. It's all about power. So one day maybe we'll get a competently done miniseries that's like 12 hours. I think that's the amount of time you need to tell the story. But I'm already excited about what Denis Villeneuve has done.
Absolutely.
It's my favorite movie of last year. I did pick up the 4K, though I missed out on the Steelbook. But this documentary is a great companion. Sleeper Must Awaken: The Making of Dune review. Right. Strongly recommend it.